6 a.m. Cold wind still carried the morning dew onto the wooden porch steps. I opened the door, barely awake, just planning to take a breath of air to shake off the sleep before heading back in to make coffee. Flannel shirt, old boots, and a half-finished yawn on my lips. But then I froze. Right in front of me, just 3 steps away, stood an adult female bear. Not in the woods, not on a trail camera, but on my porch, panting, trembling, her fur matted with dew and dried blood. And her eyes, dear God, her eyes were crying, not metaphorically, not imagined. The bear was crying. I had never seen an animal cry like that. No growling, no charging, just standing there, as if pleading, carrying an unspoken sentence. Then I saw a bear cub in her mouth. Small, limp like an old rag doll. Its head tilted to one side, legs dangling, unmoving. I almost slammed the door shut. Even glanced at the rifle hanging in the kitchen. But something in her eyes stopped me. Not instinct, not courage, but the raw desperation of a mother. I stepped back, cautiously, heart pounding like a war drum. The bear moved 1 step, 2 steps, then gently, slowly, she laid her cub on the wooden floor, as if placing it on an altar. Her eyes never left mine. She backed away, sat down, and remained silent. I looked at the cub. It was no bigger than a small dog. Ribs sharply visible, one ear dripping blood. No breathing, no motion. I knelt down, against every survival instinct I had ever learned. Every warning about, never approach a mother bear and her cub, shattered into dust. Then, the faintest motion. Almost an illusion. The cub's tiny chest, lifted ever so slightly. Alive. Yogi was alive. I looked up and met the mother bear's gaze. A gaze older than anything I had ever known, deeper than the forest. Still as a mountain. I whispered, not sure to whom. I'll try, okay? I'll do my best. She didn't respond, just sat there, as if she trusted me. As if she was giving me her child. I scooped Yogi up, wrapped him in my flannel shirt, backed into the house, heart pounding like an alarm. The mother bear didn't move. No growl, no protest, just sat there, as if praying. I placed Yogi on the old sofa. He was so small that my hand could almost cover his entire chest. Cold, still, I wrapped him in another blanket, turned on the heater, and patted everything soft and warm I could find beneath him. Old quilts, fleece sweatshirts, towels. Through the window pane, the mother bear was still there, motionless, like a statue guarding a sacred threshold. I called Mark, the local vet, the one who usually treated cows and sheep. I have an injured bear cub. It's serious. His mother brought him to my house. Silence on the other end. Did you drink anything this morning? No, Mark, please, I'm not making this up. Eventually, his tone softened, then turned serious. Keep him warm, don't feed him. Mix honey with warm water, drops only. I'll call Anna, she used to do wildlife rehab. She's on her way. Anna, I'd never met her, but that name would later mean more to me than almost anyone else. I followed the instructions step by step. Honey dissolved in water. An old turkey baster, the closest thing I had to a dropper. I opened Yogi's mouth, gently, terrified I'd hurt him. 1, 2, 3 drops. Silence. Then, the faintest flicker on the tip of his tongue. I exhaled, realizing I hadn't been breathing. Come on, little guy, come on. I sat by him for hours, mumbling random stories, humming old songs, occasionally cursing under my breath as the emotions surged like fire. Outside, the mother bear still hadn't moved. I cracked open the door. She lifted her head, met my eyes, then bowed hers, not aggressively, just exhausted and hopeful. That afternoon, Yogi twitched, a weak leg curl, like a breeze stirring through grass. I laughed, then burst into tears. I'd never been someone who believed in miracles. But maybe, that day, something bigger than me had stepped in. By evening, I gently cleaned the blood from his leg. The wound wasn't from a fall. It was a bite, deep, swollen. A male had attacked him. I guessed. In the bear world, it's cruel but not uncommon. Males kill cubs to bring the mother back into heat. But Yogi's mother, she had protected him at all costs. I dabbed a few drops of hydrogen peroxide onto the wound. Yogi flinched. Good. Pain meant life was still present. I texted Mark. His reply was short. Anna's bringing meds. She'll be there before dark. I looked outside. The mother bear was still sitting. Exactly 3 steps from the porch. Not asleep. Never looking away. Like a stone statue carved from love. Darkness fell like a thick curtain, blanketing the forest and mountains. The only sound left was Yogi's breathing, weak, but rhythmic. I sat beside the fireplace. Eyes locked on that tiny body. Terrified that if I blinked, that fragile breath might vanish. Suddenly, headlights swept across the window. I shot up. Anna had arrived. She stepped into the house like a gust of cold wind, swift, precise, and eerily calm. Hair tied back, a faded medical blouse, a first aid bag slung over her shoulder. She said only 3 words when she saw Yogi. "You kept him alive?" I nodded, unable to speak. She didn't praise me. She knelt down and got to work. Unlike any vet I had ever met, Anna carried the silence of someone who had faced life and death too many times. She gently touched Yogi's body, checked his pupil reflex, felt his joints, measured his temperature, then gave a subtle nod. "There's a chance," she whispered, "but it's thinner than spider silk." I asked through shallow breaths. "The wound on his leg?" "It's a bite," she confirmed. "Male bear. Upper jaw pressure. He wanted to kill the cub." I froze. Yogi's mother, she had fought, drove off a male, and then brought her baby to a human. Anna opened her kit, pulled out a syringe, antibiotics, fluids. I saw her hand tremble, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility pressing down on her thin shoulders. "I need you to hold his head. Gently." I did as told, sitting down, my palm resting on Yogi's ear, soft, warm, twitching faintly. When the needle touched him, he whimpered, a sound as faint as wind in tall grass. "Good," Anna said, eyes fixed on the IV. "He still reacts to pain." An hour later, Yogi had been hydrated, given anti-inflammatories, and had his wounds cleaned. Anna mixed raw honey with antibiotics to make a liquid feed, a remedy only someone experienced with orphaned bear cubs would know. "I used to do rehab for brown bears in Alaska," she said while warming him, "but I've never seen one brought to a human's doorstep like this." I nodded, my throat tightening. Maybe she knew I'd help. Anna looked at me. Her gaze held no doubt, only thoughtfulness. Some instincts go beyond biology. This kind of trust, it's rare. I walked over and opened the door, letting a breeze slip into the house. The mother bear was still there. She stood as the hinges creaked, lifting her head to look inside. I spoke softly. "Yogi's still alive." No reply, no sound, just a slow blink, as if she understood. I don't remember when I fell asleep. I just remember the flickering light from the fireplace at the edge of my vision. The soft crackling of burning wood like the steady breath of the room. When I opened my eyes, the sky was already pale with dawn. I turned my head, and Yogi was looking at me. Not the vacant stare from the day before, but a gaze with awareness. He was alert, watching me as if realizing, this man is the thin thread between life and death. I jolted upright. Anna was still asleep, her head slumped beside the makeshift bed we'd built from old blankets, wool rugs, and burlap sacks. Yogi slowly turned his head. He wanted to move, but he was still too weak. I whispered, "Easy, kid, no rush." I stood up and gently pulled back the curtain. The mother bear was still there. That was the second night she hadn't left. No food, no sleep, just sitting there, her large, dark eyes watching the cabin like some ancient spirit, waiting for something beyond instinct. I brought a bowl of warm water mixed with honey out to the porch. Didn't approach, just placed it on the step. She didn't touch it, just glanced at it, one beat, then looked back at the house. When I returned, Anna was awake. She was jotting something down in a small, frayed notebook. I didn't think this little guy would make it through the second night. She said softly, "But now, I'm not ruling anything out." I asked, my voice low, "Do you think the mother bear understands what's happening?" Anna looked up, her expression free of sarcasm or doubt. "I think bears don't need language to know who's killing their cubs and who's saving them." She paused, "And I think she's chosen to trust us." I clenched my fists, not sure what the feeling in my chest was, gratitude, weight, or fear of the burden that trust carried. By mid-morning, Yogi whimpered lightly as Anna cleaned his wounds. She worked swiftly, precisely, without a single wasted movement. I held his head, so gently it was barely a touch. Good, she murmured. He still feels pain. We fed Yogi through a syringe, a mixture of goat's milk, egg yolk, and diluted rice porridge. He swallowed slowly, but steadily. I stroked his back, feeling his little body tremble with each swallow. As long as he doesn't spike a fever, Anna whispered, he might pull through. That afternoon, as the sunlight slanted through the pine trees outside, I went out again. The mother bear had moved, now lying right next to the porch steps. Just a few hand spans from the door. No growling, no snarling, just presence, quiet, but immensely heavy. I sat on the porch step. Didn't say anything, just let my breath fall into rhythm with the land, with the sky, and with her. After a while, I spoke, not knowing why. You did good, making it here, handing him over to us. That's something no instinct could have taught. I looked into her eyes. If he survives, it'll be because the two of you did what no one thought possible. No reply, only the wind brushing away a clutch of dry leaves, and the last light of day touching the blood-matted fur on her back, making it shimmer as if she were part of the mountain itself, ancient, fierce, and inexplicably gentle. The next morning, when I opened my eyes, the room was flooded with soft golden light. The fireplace still glowed with fading embers, and Yogi was lying on his back, one front paw twitching as if he were dreaming. I jolted upright. Yogi? He rolled over, eyes half open. When he saw me, his short tail thumped once against the blanket beneath him. Dear God, I nearly cried. Anna walked into the room, hair tousled, a cup of coffee in hand. Our little bear, she whispered after checking on him. He didn't just survive, he's starting to recover. She didn't say more, but I saw Anna's eyes glisten. I stepped out onto the porch. And as I'd come to expect by now, the mother bear was still there. But this time, she wasn't sitting, she was standing, her massive frame held high, no longer slumped in despair. I thought to myself, she knows, she can feel it, that her cub, Yogi, is still breathing, still alive, growing stronger by the hour. I bowed my head to her, not as a greeting, but as a gesture of reverence. Because to go beyond instinct, beyond fear, to entrust the life of your child to a creature of another species, that must be a love greater than reason. That afternoon, Anna placed a bowl of mashed food, goat's milk, thickened porridge, and honey, in front of Yogi. He sniffed it, then licked once, then again, and when he realized he was hungry, the little guy ate like he'd never eaten before. We both burst out laughing. Maybe one day, I said, he'll tell his cubs that his first meal wasn't in a cave, but on an IKEA rug. Anna giggled, and the gourmet dish was goat's milk cooked by someone who only knows how to make instant noodles. That evening, I stepped outside holding Yogi in my arms, wrapped snugly in that old flannel shirt. As soon as his feet touched the ground, he sniffed the grass, lifted his head to catch the wind, like he was discovering the scent of the world for the first time. And then, from the forest, the mother bear emerged. No roaring, no growling, just a very slow, very deep bow toward me. I stood there, stunned. Yogi squirmed slightly in my arms. I set him down on the ground. At first, Yogi backed away, as if he'd forgotten who his mother was. But then she lowered her head and let out a low, warm rumble, not a threat, but a call. Yogi hesitantly stepped forward, sniffed, touched, then nestled into her belly like a child rediscovering the warmth of the place he had been torn from by fate. I turned away, not wanting to intrude on that sacred moment. But then, something made me look back. She was watching me, not with the eyes of a wild animal, but with the gaze of a mother. And then, the impossible happened. She used her large head to gently nudge Yogi back toward me. Once, then turned and walked back into the forest. Without looking back, without crying out, without clinging, she left me standing there, frozen in the golden light of dusk, with Yogi curled around my leg, as if he had never been gone. I thought everything would calm down after that understanding bow from the mother bear. I thought I had proven something, that even an ordinary person could be trusted by a wild creature. But life never stays still. 3 days later, on a gloomy morning, Larry, the only neighbor within a 3-mile radius, knocked on my door. His face was tense, holding a newspaper, eyes locked on the forest behind my cabin. Mike, He began, voice curt. Do you know you're raising a bear cub right next to a residential area? I nodded silently. And its mother? She's still wandering around out there, isn't she? I didn't answer. That question didn't need one. Larry tightened his grip on the newspaper, anger lurking beneath his concern. If a child, or someone, just happens to walk by and that bear attacks, who's going to be responsible? You? Less than 4 hours later, a white SUV from the county sheriff's office pulled up. Deputy Morales, the officer I used to know back when I worked as a firefighter, stepped out. Her face was stern, her eyes clearly under pressure. Mike, she said, voice both gentle and firm. We've received reports that you're keeping a wild bear at your residence. That's not legal. I handed her the medical file Anna had helped prepare, photos of Yogi's wounds, the medication log, the treatment records, and my signed commitment to return him to the wild. Morales flipped through it, frowning. There's a licensed vet involved? I nodded. Anna. She used to work with the Northern Wildlife Rescue Station. Morales stayed quiet for a moment. I'll try to delay notifying the Department of Natural Resources. But Mike, I can't hold them off forever. You need to find a way forward. That afternoon, I sat on the porch, watching Yogi roll around with a log nearly as big as he was. Every now and then, he'd lift his head, ears pricked, as if waiting for a distant growl to echo from the woods. But the forest stayed silent. I sighed. That's when Anna arrived. She didn't ask questions. She simply handed me a folder and said, if you really want to keep this little guy, we'll need a wildlife rehabilitation permit. It's tough, but doable. I opened the folder. The list of requirements ran long enough to brush my boots. Standard enclosure. Minimum 2-acre semi-wild habitat. Surveillance cameras. Weekly health records. A concrete rewilding plan. And most importantly, do not let the cub become too dependent on humans. Anna stared straight at me. Can you do it? I didn't say, yes. I just looked at Yogi, who at that moment was gnawing on a tree root like it was dessert, and nodded. That night, Morales called again. They're sending a review team this weekend. If they see any sign that you're unlawfully keeping a wild animal, you could face fines, or worse, Yogi could be taken. I looked over at Yogi's makeshift bed by the fireplace, where he lay sound asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling. And I whispered, no, not while I'm still standing. 2 days later, I woke up to the sound of pounding on the door at 6 a.m. Morales stood there, cap pulled low, face unreadable. They're on their way. The Wildlife Resources Inspection Team. 3 people. Tranquilizers. Large animal capture gear. My throat tightened. You mean, they're going to sedate and take his mother? Not just the mother, Morales replied, her gaze softening. Yogi too. They plan to transfer him to a closed wildlife training center in Wyoming. No coming back. I nodded, swallowing hard. Then, without knowing where the courage came from, I pulled out my phone and posted a photo. Yogi resting his head on my leg, eyes closed, one sharp ear perked up as if listening to the forest stories carried on the wind. And I wrote, she trusted me. She believed I wasn't just a man, but the last thing standing between her son and despair. If they take him away, it won't just be a bear losing its family. It'll be humanity losing a piece of its trust. Then I hit post. No big expectations, no strategy. 3 hours later, it had over 10,000 shares. By evening, the number reached 280,000. Messages flooded in like a river after the dam breaks. We've got land, if you need it. I'm a structural engineer. I can help build a compliant enclosure. I used to work at the Oregon Wildlife Station, ready to assist with legal paperwork. Then Anna called, her voice breathless. Mike, your post made the front page of Wild Earth Alliance. I just got a call from an international conservation group. They're willing to fast-track support to build a certified rehab enclosure. But we have less than 48 hours. The next day, trucks started arriving. Not government vehicles, but from the people. An elderly couple from Idaho brought 30 welded wire panels. A group of vet students set up camp in my yard, taking shifts to record every health marker Yogi showed. A famous artist from Seattle shared our story with millions, writing simply, "Don't let trust be gunned down by a tranquilizer." When the wildlife inspection team arrived the next morning, they didn't just see me. They saw over 100 people forming a human ring around the perimeter, holding signs, hammers, gloves, wires, a living fortress. And in the center of that gathering, Yogi, tiny and brave, poked his head out from the semi-wild tent we had completed just hours before. One inspector, looking around, shook his head. "We've never seen a community rally around a bear like this." Anna stepped forward, presenting documents confirming that Yogi was under active treatment, supervised by a wildlife specialist, within a controlled environment, with a signed plan for rehabilitation and eventual release. Morales, now standing with us, spoke, her voice firm as iron. "If you're taking Yogi, you'll have to take me too." The inspectors were silent. Then one of them finally said, "We'll file a report, but maybe this is one exception worth listening to." That night, I sat outside Yogi's tent, back against a timber post, my calloused hands resting on my knees. He slept soundly, belly rising and falling like the breeze drifting through the trees. I looked up at the sky. The moon was bright. And at the edge of the woods, those eyes, Yogi's mother's, watched us quietly from the tree line. She didn't come closer. She didn't need to. Because now, she knew, there was a whole pack of humans keeping watch over her child's sleep. 2 weeks after the community came together to build a temporary rehab shelter for Yogi, things seemed to be settling. He'd grown, gained a few more pounds, and the wound on his leg had nearly healed. Anna said, "This little guy, he's got the will to live like summer thunder." "But Mike, we can't keep him forever." I knew. And Yogi knew too. One early morning, I noticed he wasn't under the canopy like usual. I stepped outside. The sunlight cut through the mist like ribbons of silk. Then I saw Yogi, standing tall on a high rock near the edge of the forest, nose raised as if catching a scent carried by the invisible. I called softly, "Yogi?" He turned to look, didn't run back, didn't walk away, just looked, and in his eyes was a question I didn't know how to answer. Should I stay, or should I go? That afternoon, Anna arrived. We sat beneath the tree where Yogi once curled up and slept his first night. I got a call from a rehab center in Canada. She said, if we choose to, they can take Yogi in. Semi-wild lands, real forest, other cubs who lost their mothers. They'll help him relearn what it means to be wild. I clenched my hands. And if he doesn't want to go? Anna sighed. He can't stay here forever. Mike, even if he loves you, he's still a bear. And this world isn't always kind to creatures caught in between. That night, I unzipped the tent flap and let Yogi step out freely. No fence, no calling him back, just a bag of berries on the porch. And a whisper, if you have to go, then go. But if you stay, I'll find a way to protect you. He sat there all night. Didn't head into the woods. Didn't come close to me either. 3 days passed. On the third night, I found tracks, larger than before, leading deeper into the forest. Yogi had left. No goodbye. I wanted to scream, to chase after him, but I remembered the eyes of his mother. That night she laid him at my doorstep. It wasn't despair in her eyes. It was trust, that if the day came when he needed to find his own wildness again, I would let him go. A week later, in the bright warmth of morning, I was gathering firewood near the forest edge when I heard a familiar rustle. I turned. Yogi, taller, broader, his fur darker now, a fresh scratch on his left shoulder. But his eyes were glowing. And the strangest part, he didn't run to me. He stood a few paces away, tilted his head. Then he did something I never expected. He placed a warm, freshly caught rabbit in front of me. A gift, a signal. Then he turned and quietly walked back into the woods. Since then, Yogi hasn't lived with me. But I still see tracks around the cabin every few days. A large shadow weaving through the morning fog. And sometimes, a few fresh fish, a pine cone stripped clean of its seeds, will appear near the door. He hasn't left. He's just learning to live. In his own way. Between instinct and loyalty. Between the deep forest and memory. 3 weeks since Yogi left the shelter. I had grown used to the quiet emptiness. But on an early winter morning, while checking rabbit traps near the northern trail, I spotted human footprints. Not mine, not Larry's, my only neighbor for 3 miles. The prints led deeper into the woods, toward the stream Yogi used to frequent. Clear ATV tire tracks marked the dirt and shell casings from a rifle. My heart turned cold. Poachers, Unauthorized. And if they saw Yogi? A bear that didn't fear humans? I turned my truck around and drove home fast. Called Anna. After I told her, her voice slowed and grew heavy. Mike, if they report this to rangers, they'll come. A bear that's not afraid of people is usually labeled as a potential threat. They won't ask if it was raised by hand. They'll just handle the problem. You mean they'll kill him? I didn't need her to confirm. That afternoon, I went into the forest. I brought 3 things. A pouch of bright red berries, the wool blanket Yogi once curled up into sleep, and the training whistle I used to build his recall reflex. I blew it once. No sound in return. Twice. Only the wind, whipping through dry branches. Third time, a low growl echoed back from the slope. Then I saw him. Yogi. Standing on a rocky ridge, big, muscular, full grown. But those eyes, still the same eyes of the little cub in the plastic tub from long ago. I raised a hand. Someone's looking for you, buddy. Not the good kind. He didn't come closer. Just stepped down slowly, and left a rabbit carcass at my feet. His familiar gift. That night, I met with Anna and Deputy Morales, the same officer who had once come to my home. I know a bear isn't a pet, I said bluntly. But this is different. He doesn't hunt people, doesn't cause trouble, doesn't attack. He just lives. Morales shook her head. Nobody on the force wants to shoot a bear, Mike. But rules are rules. If he causes even one minor incident, he'll be considered a threat. Anna stepped in. Then what if we move Yogi to the rehab grounds near the border? The facility's semi-wild, fences. Monitored, secure. Not completely free, but not caged either. Morales looked at us, then exhaled deeply. I'll give you 2 days. After that, I can't hold them off anymore. The next morning, I returned to the woods. I brought a jar of berries soaked in honey and my old flannel shirt. The one Yogi used to curl into when he was just a cub. I placed them near the stream. Called. Waited. Nothing. That night, I slept out there in the woods, curled up beside a small fire. At dawn, I woke to the warmth of breath behind me. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Do you remember that little tent? I whispered. We'll build a new one. Closer to the forest this time. Where no one will ever lay hands on you again. Yogi snorted softly. I placed my hand on his back. Come with me again, buddy. One last time. Anna and I had exactly 48 hours to transfer Yogi to the semi-wild rehabilitation center she had arranged near the northern border. Not paradise, but a place where no one would hunt him, cage him, and most importantly, where it was legal. We started at 2 a.m. I disguised the old access path with dry straw and fallen leaves. Anna drove the truck carrying a specialized transport crate, designed for wild bears. But non-harmful. Yogi, as always, didn't cooperate, but didn't run either. He stood there in the dark, eyes saying, again, Mike? I didn't command him. I just sat on the ground, flannel shirt in hand. It's not forever, I whispered. Just a safer place, so you can live. After a few minutes, Yogi slowly approached. No chains, no force, just a choice made of trust. We hit the road, following the forest route Anna had mapped. No highways, avoiding rangers, cameras, and those who wanted Yogi to disappear. The sky was misty. Cold wind rustled through the dry pine branches. In the truck bed, Yogi was silent. No roaring, no growling, but I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, feeling something was off. Near the turnoff to the sanctuary, a black SUV with no headlights suddenly blocked the road. Anna hit the brakes hard. I jumped out, heart pounding. 3 men stepped out. No name tags, no uniforms, just tranquilizer guns and rubber bullet rifles at their sides. You're Mike, right? One asked. You're transporting an unpermitted wild animal. I clenched my fists. We have verification from the rehabilitation center near the border. We're following procedure. The man smirked. Our orders didn't come from that center. They came from higher up. I stepped back, glancing at Anna. She was dialing her phone, triggering the emergency GPS. If we didn't get out within 15 minutes, Morales would receive the alert. A low growl echoed from the truck bed. Yogi had sensed it, the tension, the scent of guns, of unfriendly men. If you touch that crate, he'll fight back, I shouted. He's not a pet. He remembers who caused pain. One of them moved forward, and before he could unlock the latch, Yogi slammed into the inside of the crate. The entire truck shook. A roar erupted, not fear. A warning. And just then, Morales's headlights cut through the fog, shining like a guardian angel. The men stepped back. "You better leave," Morales yelled, hand on her holstered weapon. They said nothing, just turned and vanished like ghosts. We arrived at the sanctuary near dawn. The gate opened, and the manager welcomed us like family long lost. Yogi was released into his own section. Dozens of acres of natural forest. No cages, just space and a safe boundary. He didn't run. He just stood still, took a long breath, and looked at me one last time. I didn't call out, didn't speak, just raised my hand, palm up, our old signal of trust. Yogi turned and walked away, his shadow disappearing into the deep woods. Anna placed a hand on my shoulder. "Do you think he'll come back?" I didn't answer, but in my heart, I knew, if ever a night falls silent, and the wind blows from the north, I will hear footsteps again. Not of a wild beast, but of a friend, like a claw mark, not a threat, a hello. I called Anna. Could Yogi have found his way back? Impossible, she replied. The rehab center is nearly 70 miles away. Double fencing. No one saw him leave. I said nothing. Some things don't need to be seen to be believed. Some spirits, whether they wear fur, bear fangs, or carry deep brown eyes, will always find their way back to where the heart once called home. By the 5th week, I woke earlier than usual. The fog hadn't lifted, and the trees still clung to sleep. And that's when I saw it. A small bare paw print in the middle of the trail, nestled between my own footprints. Not walking beside me, walking with me. That night, I left an old wool scarf out on the porch. The same scarf Yogi once dragged from the sofa and paraded across the yard like a trophy. I didn't expect anything, but the next morning, the scarf was gone. In its place, on the wooden cutting board near the window, a fresh stream trout, still glistening. There's no name for this bond. No contract. No enclosure. Just two souls, one man, one young bear, and the silent space between two forests, filled only by memory and wordless loyalty. Yogi hasn't returned for good. But I know, he knows the way. Knows I still leave the porch light on every night. Knows I still whisper good night into the darkness. And in a world where no one keeps their word anymore, that alone is a miracle. The storm came in mid-October. The sky gave no warning. No clouds. No early winds. Just a chilly afternoon. And by night, thunder cracked like gunfire on a battlefield. I was gathering firewood when the flashlight flickered. The power grid weakened. Cell signal vanished as if someone had sliced it away with a blade. Wind roared up from the forest. Leaves spun in all directions. Windows rattled. The old wooden cabin shuddered under the fury of the sky. And then, there was a sound on the porch. Not a branch breaking. Not wild animals scattering. But a whimper, faint. Broken. I opened the door. The dim beam of light swept across the wet wooden floor. And I saw Yogi. Soaked. Mud smeared across his face. His front left leg torn, a gash from shoulder to elbow. Eyes half open. Breathing ragged. That same body that once ran like the wind, climbed trees without a sound, now slumped at my doorstep like a child who'd lost his mother. "Oh God," I whispered, nearly falling to my knees. I pulled him inside, as gently as I could, laid him on the wool rug near the fireplace. Yogi didn't resist. He just looked at me with the same old eyes. The eyes of the cub once placed on my porch by his mother. I called Anna. No signal. The storm had severed all communication. I was no longer the observer. I had to be the lifesaver again. I grabbed gauze, saltwater, honey. The same things I'd once used, now needed again. But bigger, faster. Yogi was no longer a trembling ball of fur. He was grown, strong, wilder. But in that moment, when I touched his wound and he whimpered, I knew, in his pain, he had found his way back. I didn't know how far he'd come. Didn't know what had happened out there. An accident? Another attack? Or maybe, he just missed home. And in the darkness of the storm, home became this place again, where I sat shaking by the fire, whispering comfort to a wild bear. I didn't sleep all night. I stayed beside Yogi, changing bandages, dripping water, keeping the fire alive. And around 3 a.m., while the wind howled and the roof trembled with thunder, Yogi exhaled deeply, stirred, opened his eyes. He looked at me, long, deep, as if to ask, I can still stay, right? I gently touched his head. This is your home, Yogi, if you choose to stay. He nestled his head into my hand and slept again, not as a frightened cub, but as a soul that had returned. That stormy night changed everything. He didn't leave again, didn't quietly vanish into the woods like before. The next morning, when Anna arrived, she cried, not because of the wound, it was healing, but because of the choice. Yogi had chosen to stay. And I understood. Sometimes, the wildest thing isn't a place. It's a heart, one that's been hurt, but still dares to trust, one more time. About 3 weeks after the stormy night, when Yogi's wound had healed and he could run again, I started noticing strange things. Not in him, but in the forest. The nighttime sounds, once familiar, suddenly felt different. The owls didn't echo the way they used to. Leaves didn't rustle from the wind, but from movement. Something was waiting. Yogi sensed it first. He stood motionless for hours beside the tree trunk, eyes fixed on the dark patch beyond the pine line. No growling, no fear, just waiting. Then one early morning, as I was making coffee, Yogi knocked on the wooden door with his forehead like he did every day. But that day, he didn't come in, just looked. I opened the door. The wind was stronger than usual. And then, I heard it, a sound so faint, almost not a sound at all, but a calling, not the cry of a bear, not a human voice. It was the forest whispering. Yogi turned back to look at me. We didn't need words. We had been through the storm, through life and death. We understood. He had to choose. One more time. That afternoon, I took Yogi for our usual walk. Across the little creek, up the hill, through the ferns where he used to nap when he was little. At the edge of the woods, he stopped, didn't look back, didn't whimper, just stood there. I said, voice thick, you can go, Yogi. If the forest is calling, you can listen. But even if you go, this place will always be your home. He walked away, not fast, not afraid, as if he knew his way back into the forest, and also knew the way back here. I stood there until his back melted into the color of leaves, until the last gust of wind brushed across my face like an unspoken, thank you. Yogi didn't disappear. 3 days later, I found paw prints by the kitchen. Some raspberry branches had been picked. One of my old towels, pulled out of the laundry basket, folded neatly by the door. He came back, in his own way, and just like that, every few nights, I'd hear the wind shift direction, smell grass clinging to bare fur, and I knew he was still somewhere near. No longer a wounded cub, no longer a creature between life and death, but a soul of the forest, who knew how to love, how to choose, and how to be grateful. I used to think Yogi belonged to me, but now I know, he belongs to himself, and to the forest, and to me, just a little. That's the most beautiful thing. Not keeping someone close with chains, but with freedom, in memory. 10 years after that afternoon when Yogi walked into the forest, he never truly left. Not in a form you could pet, not through tracks you could follow, but in the breath of the woods. Children in the village now call this place the Waiting Bear Hill. They grow up with stories about a bear who once knocked on a man's door, not to ask for food, but to ask for a chance to save her child. And that man wasn't afraid. He didn't shoot. He didn't chase her away. He just opened the door. I'm not young anymore. My back doesn't stand straight like it used to. My knees complain every time I climb the slope. But my heart is still where I first saw Yogi. A towering, rain-soaked figure with breaking eyes. The kids still come here on weekends. Not because I'm a great storyteller, but because they believe. I tell them about Yogi. About the first time I touched those trembling claws. About the freezing night when neither of us were sure we'd live to see morning. I tell them how he chose to come back, even though the forest had already opened its arms to him. One child asked, "Grandpa, why didn't the mama bear come back for Yogi?" I looked at that child, eyes wide enough to light the whole forest. And I answered with the only truth I've carried since that day. Because she knew, some love doesn't hold on. It grants the right to choose. One June afternoon, while I was making a fire with the kids, little Ellie, 6 years old, sharp-eyed like a squirrel, suddenly stood up and pointed. "Grandpa, there's something black under that tree." I turned. No footsteps. No growl. Only silence, as deep as the forest's hollow. And then, I saw it. A large, furred figure. Head lowered. It didn't come closer. It didn't run. It just stood there, as if guarding. Or perhaps saying, "I'm still here." The children held their breath. I stood up and raised my left hand, just like I did the first time I greeted Yogi. No need for words. Because if that was Yogi, or Yogi's child, we already understood each other before language ever mattered. The figure slipped away behind the brush like a breeze passing through. But I knew. A new chapter was opening. That night, I sat on the familiar porch steps. My aged fingers touched the warm wood. The very spot where Yogi used to rest his chin whenever the rain fell. The lantern beside me swayed gently in the wind. And I whispered, "Thank you, Yogi. Thank you for coming. And thank you for not staying. So I could learn how to become part of something greater than myself." The next morning, I started writing my forest keeper's journal. I titled it, "Between Shadows and Heartbeats." Because you see, the story of a bear isn't one you tell just once and forget. It's a story meant to be passed on. To the next generation. To the children who know how to listen to the wind. And who understand that some things in the forest don't need to be tamed, only trusted. If you ever hear a knock at your door in the middle of the night from the forest's edge, listen. It might be Yogi, or the spirit of choice itself. And you, like I once did, will have to choose. Shut the door, or open your heart. Ellie grew up by the forest. Not by perilous cliffs, but by the wooden porch of an old storyteller. The man who once saved the life of a bear named Yogi. She didn't remember the first time she saw Yogi. She only remembered tilting her head up, gazing into the dense shadow beneath the trees. And her heart quietly exhaled. He didn't lie. Ellie didn't play with dolls like the other children. She played with rotting bark, drew on stones with forest charcoal. And every night, she wrote in her diary with crooked handwriting, "Yogi didn't come today, but I heard the leaves lean toward me." At 13, Ellie witnessed a squirrel caught in a trap for the first time. Instead of fear, she used trembling hands to untangle the steel wires. And murmured, as if someone had once taught her, "Don't be scared, I'm not like them." At 18, Ellie left the forest, not to escape, but to return one day with hands full of knowledge. Not just a tender heart. She studied veterinary medicine, but not to give vaccines to house cats. She learned how to operate on bears, read wildlife ultrasounds, and spent hours in rehabilitation centers just to record the breathing patterns of a red fox. Ellie often told her professor, "I don't want to build zoos. I want to build places to come home to." People laughed. She didn't care. At 24, Ellie returned to the forest. And the old man, now with hair as white as morning mist, was waiting on the porch. "You're still sitting here?" she asked. He smiled. Because if no one tends the fire, the forest forgets how to light up for those returning. She embraced him. He trembled slightly in the arms of the little girl who once listened to his stories. Now she returned, not just to listen, but to become the next chapter. Together, they built the first shelter. The Yogi Sanctuary. A small hut with a grass roof. Beside the old stream where Yogi once bathed in the summer days. Children from the town started coming. Not to take selfies, but to learn how to clean wounds for wild animals. To understand that a bird with a broken wing doesn't need pity, but space, time, and trust. One day, Ellie received an old wooden box. Inside was the old man's notebook, Between Shadows and Heartbeats, and a handwritten note. To Ellie, the one who will tell the rest of the story I didn't have time to finish. She cried, not like a child, but like a forest keeper, receiving a sacred torch from hands that once trembled while holding life itself. That winter, something strange happened. At dusk, in the violet light of the first snowy day, a large figure appeared at the forest's edge. No growl, no charge, just a bear's silhouette. Not too old, not too young, a faint scar on its neck, and in its eyes, something familiar. Ellie stepped forward. Her heart was strangely calm. "Are you?" she whispered. "Are you, Yogi's child?" There was no answer, just the figure bowing its head, sniffing the stone bench where the old man once sat, then turning away, disappearing into the twilight, like a dream not yet faded. Ellie stood there for a long time, until a squirrel leapt onto her shoulder. And she smiled. "All right then, another day begins." He was born beneath a flaming red maple in autumn. No witnesses. No cheers from mankind. Only the forest wind acted as midwife. And the earth itself, his first swaddle. His mother never gave him a name. But if she had, it might have been silence. For from the moment he was born, he never made a sound. No growl. No cry. No whimper. Only watching. With eyes as deep and still as an ancient lake. From a young age, he was unlike other bears. He didn't crave honey. Didn't crave hibernation. He preferred watching humans from afar. Especially that old sanctuary that smelled of damp wood and herbs. Where a human girl named Ellie quietly came and went. Once, Ellie was bending down to pick up a fallen bird's nest. When she saw two amber eyes glinting through the trees. She stopped. Didn't call. Didn't chase. Just lifted her head in greeting. As if recognizing an old acquaintance. And for the first time, the young bear nodded back. In the spring of his second year, a drought hit the forest. Streams dried up, fish died, wild animals began to creep closer to the village. And the humans grew angry. One night, Ellie found a deer shot dead. Its body dumped near the sanctuary fence. Not out of hunger, but out of fear. Ellie knew, if no one intervened, another war between the forest and mankind would erupt. But this time, she wasn't alone. That night, she walked into the woods. Carrying a breathing tube, antiseptic, and an old, unwavering trust. She went to the very tree where, 4 years prior, a mother bear had vanished. And she waited. When the darkness thickened like ink, a quiet shape appeared. No longer cub, no longer trembling. Just a young male bear, large and composed, with eyes that looked at humans not as prey, but as a kind of conversation. "It's you, isn't it?" Ellie whispered. The wind didn't reply. But the bear nodded. They didn't speak in words. They spoke in presence. And that night, Ellie told him, not with her mouth, but with every gesture, about fearful humans, loaded guns, and how the forest needed someone to restore balance. The bear listened, didn't roar, didn't leave, just stood there, quiet, and in agreement. From that day forward, rumors spread. There was a special bear, who didn't break fences, who didn't kill livestock, but who always appeared. Whenever a wild animal wandered into town, he never harmed anyone. He simply guided them back into the forest. And the scientists? They called it the border station effect. A place where forest and human no longer stood as two separate worlds, but as two ends of the same unanswered question. One day, a documentary crew came to film the special bear. They waited 3 nights. On the 4th, a bear stepped out from the forest shadows. Quiet, wild, yet not hostile. The camera shook. No one dared approach. But a little girl, Ellie's daughter, around 5 years old, ran into the frame and waved. "Mr. Bear," she called. And the bear nodded. That moment became legend. Not because a bear responded to a child, but because, at long last, a human listened. The bear never lived with humans, was never domesticated, was never given an official name. But the children in the village called him young Yogi. Not to replace anyone, but to remember that trust, too, can be passed down. And Ellie? She often says, when standing before little schoolchildren visiting the sanctuary, bears don't need us to be their friends. They just need us not to be their enemies. There was no roar, no body, no blood, just a morning when the forest wind blew colder than usual. And young Yogi never appeared again. Ellie was the first to notice. She opened the sanctuary door like every morning, placed a bowl of water on the porch, and waited. But there were no heavy paw steps on the leaf bed, no silent shadow emerging from the woods, no quiet nod like every other day. She called. The wind replied. On the 3rd day, biologists launched a search. Yogi's last paw prints led north, into the deep forest where no research post dared to go. A place the local people called the sleeping land, where every sound felt drained away. On the 5th day, village children made signs in messy crayon. "Come home, Yogi, we still saved your honey." The grown-ups said nothing. But the light on Ellie's porch never went out. Not even on rainy nights. By week 2, the first animal wandered into the village. A skinny lynx cub walked straight into the preschool garden. But there was no forest guardian to lead it back this time. A young officer had to fire a warning shot. The children screamed. Ellie clenched her fists. but said nothing. Then came a deer, a wolf, and a male bear. The boundary had lost its keeper. When week 3 passed with no sign of young Yogi, Ellie made a decision. She left. Alone. She left a single note on the sanctuary door. If I don't come back, let the forest be. For 3 days, no one saw her. No signal. No texts. No answers. Until the 4th day, a hunter's son discovered, on the porch step of the sanctuary, was a bowl of water, still warm, and a fresh bear claw mark etched into the wood, in the shape of an arrow, pointing west. The next day, Ellie returned, thinner, quieter. On her shoulder were a few thick strands of dark brown fur. She said very little, only looked toward the forest and whispered, "He's still out there, but not for us anymore." From that day forward, young Yogi never again came to the forest edge, never returned to the porch, never sniffed the water bowl, never nodded to the children. But the forest was calm. No deer lost their way. No male bears approached the village. And small offerings, honey, berries, a dead rabbit, began appearing by the sanctuary fence. One stormy night, Ellie found a single dry branch stood upright before the porch. At its base was a shoulder-length fur tuft, larger than any she'd seen. Not from Yogi, but from something greater. She understood. Yogi hadn't just left. He had become something else. No longer the guardian for humans, but the silent leader of the wild. A symbol of transition. A bridge that humans could only cross if they truly listened. And that was the final thing Yogi left behind. Not a body, not a roar, but an absence. A way for the forest to say, "We can take care of ourselves, as long as you stop disturbing the balance." Now, each nightfall, Ellie still lights a small oil lamp on the porch. Not to guide anyone back, but to remind. Some connections, the quieter they are, the stronger they become. Yogi never came back, but he never really left. And the story ends, not in reunion, but in continuation, between the wild and the human heart.